Fan Zhongyan's imperial examination reform. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, the imperial examinations became more and more complicated. There were county examinations, prefecture examinations, and courtyard examinations, and then royal examinations and palace examinations. However, in the Song dynasty, there were only three-level imperial examinations, and there were no county examinations, government examinations, and academy examinations. There were only prefecture-level examinations in autumn, provincial examinations from the Ministry of Rites in the first month, and palace examinations in March. When the Song dynasty was founded, there were few scholars. Later, a lock-in system and a name-blinding system were implemented to make the imperial examination more fair. However, there are still many shortcomings. First of all, the examination is not strictly controlled, and many cases of fraud occur, resulting in serious unevenness in the quality of the exams. Some use fake names to take the imperial examination because of their poor background, or take advantage of the inconsistent examination time in various states and use several vests to participate in multiple examinations. Some people are even lucky enough to be talented and academic and can be ranked on the examination list of 3 or 4 states. Therefore, during the Qingli New Deal, Fan Zhongyan also initiated a series of reforms in the imperial examination. The military governors of various prefectures ordered the establishment of schools. Only when the number of students studying there reached more than 200, another county school was allowed to be established to save expenses. If the situation in the prefecture and county is poor, then the Wangshenwang Temple, the Confucius Temple, or the official house will be used as the school building, and professors will be selected from the shogunate officials in the prefectures and counties. If there are no shogunate officials who are good at literature, then the virtuous and artistic people in the local area will be selected to serve as professors, with a term of 3 years. Students who enroll must be recommended by 2 people. The students must be natives of the hometown, or have lived there for a long time, and must be filial and loyal, and have never been in lawsuits or have been in lawsuits with not serious circumstances. Only then can they be eligible to enroll. Students must study in state schools for 300 or 500 days before they are eligible to take the imperial examination. At the same time, Jinshi candidates must have 3 people to guarantee that the examinee has not committed 7 crimes. 1 is to hide the worry, 2 has committed criminal punishment, 3 has been unfilial and disloyal, with obvious traces, for has violated the Constitution and has been redeemed twice, or has not been redeemed and has harmed the village. 5 is not a native, fake household and name. The 6th ancestor and father have committed 4 or more 10 evil crimes. 7 are industrial and commercial miscellaneous people, and have been monks and Taoists, and they are not allowed to be admitted. For the Imperial College and Kaifeng exams, 5 people are required to guarantee the exam, and the exam must be inspected and reviewed by local officials before students can take the exam. If there is any mistake, the guarantor and the officials will be punished together. In the Jinshi test, the first thing to do is to ask about the classics and its meaning, first to ask about the history of the classics, secondly to ask about current affairs, then to try to discuss it, and then to try 1 poem each, as well as a series of other detailed adjustments. The 9 classics, 5 classics, 3 rites, 3 biography, 3 histories, and Mingfa have also been simplified and adjusted. The examinations of various prefectures and prefectures are no longer sealed and transcribed, while those of the Imperial College, Kaifeng Prefecture, provincial examinations, and imperial examinations are still sealed and transcribed. This reform tied the imperial examinations to state and county schools, further stimulating the development of education. The recommendation system ensures students' moral character and at the same time improves the status of policy, which means that students can learn and apply it instead of memorizing it by rote and turning into nerds one by one. However, there are also many disadvantages. If the anonymity system is no longer implemented in the exams, students will not dare to use vests to take exams, but fraud and unfairness will become more serious. Students who enter prefecture or county schools will be exempted from corvée service by their families in their hometown, but they have to pay for food, drink, housing, and accommodation by themselves. Moreover, the number of children from poor families who are willing to recommend them raises the threshold for the imperial examination. Many poor students want to take the imperial examination, and it becomes more difficult, which is inconsistent with the Qiren system of the Song dynasty. The next year, Yu Jing wrote a letter in order to allow poor people to make a living and study without losing their place, so the listening and reading time was reduced or canceled altogether. In the third year, Yang Cha wrote again that the sound of poems and poems is easy to examine, but the policy theory is difficult to understand, and he abolished the system of discussing policies first, and then poems and poems. A few years later, Fengmi transcription recording was implemented in prefectures and counties. However, some remained, such as the recommendation system, and others continued to influence. Although the qualifications for the imperial examination were no longer linked to prefectural and county schools, due to the cumbersome review process, priority was still given to students from prefectural and county schools. For example, Su Dongpa, although his father was a great writer and his mother Cheng was a talented woman, they sent him to Sanfeng Mountain Taoist Temple to attend elementary school when he was a child. Later, when he saw that Su Dongpa did not study all day and only played, Cheng took him back and educated him personally. Then he was sent to his hometown to study at Shixiang Temple and later to the county school. In order to take care of him, the family had to move into a rented house in the city. To a certain extent, although Fan Zhongyan promoted state and county education, he also more or less made the children of poor families suffer. In short, like other Qingli reforms, it is an immature innovation. Especially for Xiasong, you must know that without Liu Yiji and Xiasong, Fan Zhongyan and Han Qi would not have come to power so smoothly, but the gentlemen were too harsh. Personally, I think these two words should describe Fan Zhongyan. Jiaozi and copper coins of the Song dynasty. The currency of the Song dynasty was very complicated. Copper coins were currency and jiaozi was currency. At the same time, many areas cast a large amount of iron coins due to lack of money for transactions. Tea-yin and yen-yin, and even later monks and Taoists could also be used as currency in a certain sense. Gold and silver were not currencies, but they were also quasi-currency. The Jin dynasty invaded the Song dynasty and looted 20 million gold ingots and 20 million silver ingots. And there are differences even in copper coins. Some are big coins, some are small coins. In some eras, the copper coins issued are of good quality, so they are more expensive, but in some eras, the copper coins issued are indiscriminately used to make up money, and the proportion of tin and lead mixed in them is high, so they are relatively cheap. However, in general, each generation of copper coins is not as good as the previous one. The Zhou Yuan Tongbao cast in the later Zhou dynasty is of the best quality, followed by the Song Yuan Tongbao issued by Zhao Kuangyin, Zhao Kuangyi's Yutaiping Tongbao, Chenhua Yuanbao, Zhaoheng Xianping Yuanbao, Jingde Yuanbao, Shengfu Yuanbao, Tianshi Yuanbao, Tianxing Yuanbao, and Mingdao Yuanbao issued by Som Renzong Zhaozhen. Jingyu Yuanbao, Huangsong Yuanbao, Qingli Chongbao, Jihe Yuanbao, Jihe Chongbao, Jiao Yuanbao, and Jiao Chongbao were also the emperors who issued the most copper coins. However, except for the two kinds of copper coins of Mingdao and Tianxing, the quality of the other copper coins was extremely poor, especially that kind of heavy treasure. One coin was used as 10 coins, which once caused the price of the entire country to rise. With so much currency originally issued, cloth and silk could also be regarded as quasi-currency, and the barter method should be able to meet the needs of commercial transactions in the Song dynasty. However, because economic thinking could not keep up and commerce was unprecedentedly prosperous, it resulted in many deformed economies, such as money shortages. The first reason is that copper coins circulated in large quantities, and even some island countries in Southeast Asia used copper coins from the Song dynasty. Secondly, there is a place to save money now, but you need to pay storage fees instead of earning interest. So many families bury copper coins at home. This is why the strange incident of tens of thousands of copper coins being unearthed at one time happened. The third payment was not handled properly, resulting in insufficient credibility and preventing it from playing a good role as banknotes. The fourth is that prices were also rising in the Song dynasty. So many people used money to make use of it. Therefore, there are often people who want to exchange cloth for money, but they cannot get a penny in exchange for several days. However, the imperial court issued hundreds of thousands of copper coins to a certain state, and they could all be snatched up in the blink of an eye. In short, it was due to unregulated reasons, but that era was also the era of scholars, farmers, industry, and commerce, and those who had such brilliant economic ideas. Let's talk about Jiaozi again. The Song dynasty was not the first country to use paper money. There were Libu coins in the Western Zhou dynasty, cowhide coins and fu coins in the Eastern Zhou dynasty, white deer skin coins in the Han dynasty, and flying coins in the Tang dynasty. In some respects, they can all be regarded as quasi-currency. In the Song dynasty, due to the lack of copper in Sichuan and backward transportation, Song Taizu started casting iron coins in Sichuan and banned copper coins from entering Shu. During the reign of Emperor Taizong of the Song dynasty, copper coins were allowed to enter Shu, but Sichuan iron coins were not allowed to leave the country, so as not to disrupt the currency of the Central Plains. Therefore, Sichuan was still short of money. Iron money is cheap and heavy. It costs 20,000 iron coins to buy a piece of cloth, which weighs about 500 kilograms and requires a large cart to pull. Hence the creation of Jiaozi. It started to be chaotic, random, easy to fake, and brought new troubles. Therefore, the government asked the 16 most powerful wealthy businessmen in Chengdu to jointly set up Jiaozi Pu, print them uniformly, and use the 60 heavenly stems and earthly branches as the code. However, when cashing in or exchanging the old for a new one, 30 cash would be deducted as a handling fee. When Lu Yi, a Sichuan girl, came to power, the government took over Jiaozi. The quantity was controlled at the beginning and was divided into 1 to 10 types of jiaozi. Therefore, it was a measure to facilitate the country and the people. Now Emperor Renzong, because of the war in the northwest, the country was short of money, so he issued many jiaozi on a large scale, and the denominations were large, and there were only 2 kinds of 10 strings and 5 strings. For a time, Qinzhou jiaozi was unable to cash in, so it was forcibly hedged with the 13th batch of jiaozi issued by the 13 realms jiaozi in the Song dynasty, which led to a sharp decline in jiaozi's credibility and serious devaluation. However, with the end of the large-scale war in the northwest and the economic hedging between the Central Plains and Bashu, jiaozi itself has the advantage of being convenient for circulation, and the reputation of jiaozi gradually recovered in Shaanxi. But ordinary people still use it relatively little. How many people often use 5 or 10 wands to buy things? But it is indeed very convenient to have it. For example, for some large transactions, or for a meal at Fanlu in Tokyo, it costs hundreds or even thousands of guan. You must either use silver or jiaozi. If you use copper coins, is it difficult to use 2 or 3 carts to transport copper coins to have a meal? It is a pity that there were no economic experts in the Song dynasty, and it was a pity that jiaozi was not well controlled. Collected and organized by Kenshu, CC, the copyright belongs to the author or publisher. Zhong Shiheng's camp. The state-owned land properties of the Song dynasty included farm fields, camp fields, archer fields, official fields, horse supervisory fields, vocational fields, and academic fields. Shuedian is a property that subsidizes schools. The Song dynasty set aside this field and let the people cultivate it. The proceeds paid for the salaries of professors in various states, counties, and academies, as well as repairs or other expenses. Job land is the official's bonus. In the Song dynasty, officials would often add a fief and a real estate at the end. A fief is an honor, and a real estate refers to the job land. The income from the job land belongs to the official's welfare, but it is not owned by the official. Once he becomes an official, the country will take it back. The stockyard is a place where horses are raised. Official land belonged to the imperial court, and it was also the cultivated land set aside for school and professional fields. The remaining 3 are all related to the military. Farming was done by officers and soldiers who guarded the border and farmed the land. However, the Song dynasty adopted a recruitment system, and all the soldiers became urban soldiers. There was no hope that they could cultivate the fields well. Therefore, the farming was of little use, and instead caused many disputes. Therefore, the Song dynasty repeatedly withdrew the farming to the people. Archer fields are mainly located in Qinwei, Shaanxi, and other places. Archers assist officers and soldiers in border defense. The state allocates their fields for self-reliance, but the ownership of the fields belongs to the state. The camp field is mainly used to recruit people for farming. It first appeared in the border areas between Xiongzhou and Hebei, but it was all converted into farmland or civilian farmland. As the name suggests, camp fields are managed, owned by government officers and soldiers, and hired by people to cultivate them. Zhong Xiong went to build Qingjian City. Why did the Song dynasty spend a lot of money during the Song-Xia War? The main reason was the waste of food transportation. Loads and loads of grain were moved from various states and counties to boats, and then transported by boat to Sanmenxia, and then transferred ashore. After traveling dozens of miles, they were disembarked from the boat and transported to Guangzhou, then used small cars to push them step by step from Guangzhou to the front line. It often takes hundreds of loads of grain to transport a load of grain to the front line. Therefore, at its peak, a bucket of corn, which was worth only a few cents in the rear, was worth 300 to 400 cents when transported to the front line, and reached more than 1,000 cents at its peak. Just when Li Yuanhao conquered Jiming village, many people either spontaneously migrated or were forcibly taken captive to Xixia territory. The remaining people fled south one after another, and many cultivated lands north of Yanzhou were deserted. After Qingjian City was built, a large number of people came to Qingjian City to escape. Because of these innate conditions, Zhong Xiong moved out the eliminated camp system and opened up 2,000 hectares of camp land in Qingjian City. He also connected with merchants and attracted the surrounding Chang people. Therefore, whenever the Xia people invaded, the Chang people would spontaneously notify them and be prepared for every battle. But the next year, Zhong Xiong was transferred to Huangzhou. Zhong Xiong was not in Qingjian City. Song and Xia stopped fighting again, and the people who fled returned to their homes one after another, and the shortcomings of the camp were revealed. It is not the field of archers. The people who work the fields are the archers themselves. The more you work, the more you will get. It's not just farming. The people farming are soldiers, and the income earned within the army is distributed within the army. The 2,000 hectares of camp land made a huge profit in a year. How could the school be willing to return it to the people? They even forced the people to rent crops and levied highland rent. Fan Zhongyan and Han Qi successively wrote letters requesting the court to stop the Qingjian City camp. The imperial court also issued an edict to suspend it. But here comes the problem. The Song dynasty spent a lot of money to raise soldiers, but the actual salary shared by each soldier was not much. Especially when stationed on the border, it was very difficult. With the camp field, the soldiers had an extra income, but if it was taken back, the soldiers' income would be less, and the military morale would inevitably be unstable. If the camp fields are withdrawn to the people and there are many Chang people in Qingjian City, they will not farm but use them for grazing, and Yanzhou will be short of some military rations. 1 stone of millet cost only 100 cents in the rear, but at the front it might cost 4 to 10 cents. Retreating will invisibly increase a lot of expenses for the court. Therefore, the ban cannot be banned, and it can't help but harm the people. The 2,000 hectares of camp land are left there, becoming the biggest useless thing in Yanzhou. Chapter 1: Carrying a Mule. Jiao 5 years. These few years were the best time in the entire Northern Song dynasty. People were singing and dancing, and the country was prosperous. Of course, it had nothing to do with being strong. But there are always places where the sun doesn't shine. A Hanzhou River flows slowly from Hingshan. Most of the villages and villages upstream are in dilapidated condition. The people live in dilapidated cave dwellings. Even the dilapidated cave dwellings cannot be repaired. Half of the people live in dilapidated shacks and wear tattered clothes. They live in this dilapidated world and mountains and rivers. Wang Jiazhai is also a dilapidated village. Wang Ju shook his old linen robe and looked at the gray sky with a sad expression. He was lucky enough to be reborn, but he was reborn in this miserable place. In order to survive, he had to work hard as a mule. Damn it, Suddenly the scene of General He Long dancing with a kitchen knife appeared in his mind. Then he looked at his thin body and wanted to shout to the sky, "Grandmas." Many of the endless hills and hills are left with traces of burning by the mountain people. They were caught between the Song and Xia countries, fighting back and forth. They were desolate and deserted, and short and dense shrubs grew up. There are also countless wild amaranths, pig-haired cherry trees, and small thistles growing on the ground. The wheels of the wheel roll over it, grinding out a layer of green juice. It's just that these mature wild vegetables have many small burrs, which will cause some slight pain and numbness on the legs of the villagers. Heaven and earth were silent. Occasionally, a few wild rabbits, dogs, and roe deer jumped out of the bushes, looked at the group of people in panic, and then rushed into the forest, but the mountain people had no intention of hunting. "Who?" Wang Ju's second uncle Wang Wei shouted, and ran into the grass. The mountain men pulled out the knives on their backs almost at the same time. Regardless of the high salary, a mule trip can earn you 100 guan, and one person can get almost half of the guan, but the dangers are no less than those of the seafarers on the seaside. The slightest hint of disturbance will make people nervous. Two women stood out in the grass, one in her early 20s and one in her teens. They both had a sword stuck in their waists. They both looked very pretty, but the clothes were stained with dust, like two kittens that had been wandering outside for several days. But Wang Ju stood nearby and saw clearly that although she was dressed like an ordinary woman, the young woman had an indescribable temperament. It seems that there is one master and one maid. The younger woman's face changed slightly and she mumbled, "We are lost people." Being a mule is dangerous, but it looks a bit scary. He is carrying a bow and a knife. Even though they are ordinary simple knives and mulberry bows, they are weapons, and there are more than 100 big men, which obviously scares her. "Lost?" Manager Zhu Qing stepped forward and asked suspiciously. "It is possible. Don't think there is a sun, but you have to know how much time it is before you can tell the direction." "But where is the time?" "Yes, in the city, the most accurate thing is not the hourglass, but the water leak. Even if it is a water leak, it will only be accurate if it is still. Therefore, in an era without compasses and without a guide who is familiar with the local environment to lead the way, you would often get lost. But their business is shady." "Are you all from Song Dynasty?" the young woman asked calmly. "You are from the other side of the mountain." "Beyond the mountain." "Over there at Hingshan." "You say they're from Xixia, but we are not." A very normal answer, but actually a very strange answer. That is a language problem. The Han people in Xixia speak Chinese, and the Chong people speak Chong language. And the same is true here in Yanzhou. There are slight regional differences, but in the border areas, most Chong people can speak a few words of Chinese, and the Han people can also speak a few words of Chong. Chinese is the mainstream, and the Chong language is too confusing. There are Tubo people, Dongxiang people, Tuyuhun people, and some descendants of the Hu people resettled in various deserts left by the Tang dynasty. Zhu Qing thought for a while. "No, you are from the Central Plains." He was the steward of his employer. Yanzhou is plagued by private goods, and merchants from all over the north of the Song dynasty finally heard the accents of the two women. The young woman hesitated and said, "We are from the Central Plains. Where are we?" Wang Wei said, "Daling." "Where is Duao Ridge?" Second uncle stopped talking. "If you tell me the names of all the surrounding mountains, I'm afraid they won't be able to figure them out." Wang Ju stepped forward and said. He looked at the two women again. "Why are you here?" This is all a border area. Wang Ju used to hunt with his second uncle, and the furthest ones have not yet reached here. "We lost our way. Yanzhou is over there." "I'll tell you where Yanzhou is. Can you walk back to Yanzhou safely? If you get lost again, you will really end up in Xixia in a few turns." Wang Ju said funnily. There was so much chaos on the border, and it was a miracle that two women were still safe after getting lost. "Then what should we do?" the maid said eagerly. Wang Ju turned to look at everyone. Manager Zhu, Weng Weng, these two women are pitiful. Why not let them come with us? We will take them to the road, find a car for them, and take them back to Yenzhou. Zhu Qing was displeased. Boy, you're getting into trouble. Otherwise, if they keep going like this, something will happen sooner or later. The female mouth of this era is the real deal. But Wang Zhu is still influenced by the ideas of his previous life. Women and children are ultimately a vulnerable group and need to be taken care of. Otherwise, even if they don't transfer to Xixia, sooner or later they will be taken away as property by the Chang people. Zhu Qing frowned. He hesitated for a long time and finally nodded. However, there was hesitation in the eyes of the two women. We are all from the Song dynasty, Wang Zhu said. In this chaotic place, a Song dynasty person contains too many meanings. The young woman nodded. Concubine, let's just go with them. Get on the road, Zhu Qing shouted. The sound of wheels sounded again, and more than 100 people were eerily silent. Where did you take this guy? The maid named Sheener asked curiously. Don't ask, Wang Zhu said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He couldn't hear any Central Plains dialect. It took him 3 months in the village to become fluent in the Shangxi dialect of the Song dynasty. He couldn't tell the difference in pronunciation from other places. However, both Yenzhou and the Baoan army had some foreign merchants, maybe their family members, who went out of the city to have fun and got lost. As a result, they went further and further and ended up at the border. But why did these merchants come to Yenzhou and Baoanzhengqing for private goods? Wang Zhu's cold drink made the two women shut their mouths. Almost there. Zhu Qing stood on the top of the hill, looking northwest, and said. Wang Zhu stopped, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked at Zhu Qing. The mountain wind blew, making Zhu Qing's brown silk robe rustle. The silk robe was a bit old, and maybe because he often traveled in the mountains, you could see a few patches on the legs of the robe, but he still stood out among a group of villagers wearing tattered linen clothes. Wang Zhu stared at the small river under the hill and asked, That's the Zongdi River. Yes, after crossing that river, there is the border of Xixia people. Little one, be curious. The little guy Wang Zhu smiled, feeling a little speechless. He is not curious, and what Zhu Guanqi said is wrong. From Shening Village to the foot of Hengshan Mountain, it cannot be called the territory of the Song dynasty, nor can it be called the territory of Xixia. Strictly speaking, it is the idle field zone mentioned in ancient books, an area where no one cares about anything. But what made him curious was that the officers and soldiers of the Song dynasty did not ask any questions along the way. Could it be that Manager Zhu's employer bribed the security officers and soldiers together? Walk, Zhu Qing ordered. He didn't ask Wang Zhu why he came to the border to seek life at the age of 13. The people in the border areas are very miserable, and there are many teenagers who are running their own families and starting businesses. The wheel made an unpleasant squeaking sound again. The motorcade quickly arrived at the foot of the hill with this monotonous sound and stopped one by one under the command of Zhu Qing. Ahead is the Zongdi River. Don't look at it as small. Because of the war, it may go down in history. Wang Zhulai squinted his eyes and looked at this temporary border river. The small Tibetan bottom river was sparkling, and the water was so clear that one could almost see the pebbles and fish swimming under the river. The surroundings were still filled with a lonely and monotonous beauty, but the shadowy figures on the opposite bank made the villagers nervous. Zhu Qing didn't care and whistled a few times. Wang Zhu immediately saw a man with fair hair coming out from the opposite side. Zhu Qing strode forward to greet them. The two of them didn't know what they said, but suddenly many carriages, donkeys, and mules appeared on the opposite side. Compared with the rickshaws on this side of the river, the formation is obviously much more luxurious. Zhu Qing came back and said loudly, "The transaction was successful." Following this sound, both sides sent people to inspect the goods on the opposite side. Just looking at a few Tibetan people wearing xiaogujian looking at the goods next to a car, more than 100 villagers seemed to hold their breath. The Khitan raided the grass valleys, the Xixia captured the soldiers, the Tubo became bandits, and the Annans sold slaves. Wang Ju thought in his heart. At this moment, he looked at the nervous expressions of the villagers and felt the suffering of the people in the border areas of the Song dynasty. Chapter 2: Black Bee Thief. Several people watched for a while and then went back. Kuner seemed to be very satisfied with the transaction. He watched the people on both sides unload the goods and move them to the cars on the other side. Then he extended his hand to Zhu Qing, but his fingers were tucked under the other party's robe. After a while, the two laughed again. It seems that before the villagers knew it, the two struck up another deal. After unloading the goods, both parties left separately. Except for Zhu Qing and Kuner, no one spoke to them. Song Xia had fought for so many years and accumulated too much hatred. However, compared to the tension and worry of the villagers here in Song Dynasty, the Xia people on the other side of the mountain had pride and contempt in their eyes. The convoy returns. Everyone has a tacit understanding not to mention the things in the cattail bag, but the weight has increased a lot, making the clumsy wheelbarrow make a louder noise, like a painful and seriously ill patient shouting loudly. Concubine suddenly woke up and said, "You are selling smuggled salt." Ipu. Wang Ju wanted to understand her mouth. Could she say these two words easily? Don't your Elung deal in private goods? Zhu Qing asked angrily. He won't. I don't know why you came to Yenzhou. When you come to Yenzhou, you are selling smuggled salt. This is the family principle. Zhu Qing stopped and looked at the pair of masters and made steadily. The young woman quickly said, "She is young and doesn't understand." But a cold light flashed in Zhu Qing's eyes. Wang Ju shook his head in his heart. But now is not the time to care about the identities of the two women. Zhu Qing shouted, "Don't relax, everyone. The most dangerous thing is the way back." Just one sentence made everyone feel inexplicably nervous. If the officers and soldiers discovered the cargo on this group of nearly 100 unicycles, everyone from top to bottom would be beheaded. This is just one of the dangers. A few strong men broke away from the convoy, either in front or behind, and kept climbing to the tops of several hills to look around. The wheels were quiet again, except for the birds, which were frightened by the group from time to time, flying in the air and chirping wildly. The young woman looked at everyone's expressions and actions curiously. But she was not stupid. Only this young man in the crowd seemed to have a friendly attitude towards them, so he asked in a low voice, "Why do you say the way back is the most dangerous?" When the mountain breeze blows, you can smell the faint fragrance of musk orchid coming from her body. What do your officials do? Zhu Qing immediately pricked up his ears. He is a dandy farmer. In the Song dynasty, Tainshuang did not necessarily refer to an old farmer. Sometimes it was a curse word, country bumpkin, and by extension, rude person. He seems to have a good background, and he doesn't know how to curse. This is a curse word. Seeing the discord between the couple, every word is laced with resentment. But before she revealed her husband's identity, Wang Ju was kind enough to remind her in the most obscure way, "He hasn't explained it to you yet." Explain. Since your official came to Yenzhou and is from the Central Plains, it was just for personal gain. Didn't he say anything at all? After Wang Ju finished speaking, he winked secretly. Private goods, whether they are private goods or not, are all a fool's errand. If your husband is a private goods dealer, then he will definitely not speak out if he joins this team. But they're not dealing in private goods. Who is not afraid of leaking the news? Here, human life is like grass. If I really attack you, how can you stop anyone with the little sword on your maid? The young woman was surprised at first, but she also came to her senses. He never told me this. No wonder you don't understand anything. When the smuggled goods went out, they were cloth and silk tea leaves. Even if they are found, it doesn't matter. After all, there are some Song dynasty villages on the border. As long as they insist on trading them to the border residents, the government has nothing to do. It's different when you come back. It's the goods from over there, so the officers and soldiers mostly arrest them at this time, and the black ones eat the black ones. The black eats the black. Could it be that they can't turn it in? This situation is rare. Generally, bosses have taken care of their subordinates and officers and soldiers. What you are most afraid of is the bandits along the way. You have lost your way, but there has been no trouble on this land. How lucky you are. Not only do you have officers and soldiers who do evil, but also some savage villagers, bandits, and invasions from the mountains from time to time. They rob everything, property, food, people, even the elderly and children, not to mention you too. Wang Ju couldn't help shaking his head. Boy, you have some knowledge. Zhu Qing praised. My late father died in the battle, and my mother remarried to Jiang Yuanwei from Baoan Army City. Jiang Yuan's wife didn't like my son, my second sister, and my third brother, so my second uncle took us back to the village. By luck, I got to know a few words in the Jiang family, and also saw some things in the outside world. This may be a heavy history. In Shaanxi, especially in the border areas, the imperial court set up many rural soldiers, including Tibetan soldiers, Shaanxi's local Forbidden Army and Baojia Army, as well as archers and strong men. The Song and Xia dynasties fought for so many years, and countless soldiers died, including Shaanxi's rural soldiers. When the husband dies, the woman has to remarry. This boy had pretty features and good looks, and it seemed that his mother was also pretty, so he remarried to the Jiang family in Baoanjian City. However, some remarried well, and some remarried poorly. For example, when Fan Wenzhenggang's mother remarried to the Zhu family, she did not marry well, but instead created a legend. Of course, there is only one Duke Fan Wenzheng in the world, and this boy cannot be compared with him. However, only the person involved knows the bitterness involved. It was the Zhu family's mule after all. Zhu Qing patted Wang Ju on the shoulder comfortingly. The young woman was thoughtful. Unknowingly, the sun was setting, and the group was walking more closely, and the sound of wheelbarrow wheels became more intensive. Under the dim light and shadow, more than 100 men had large beads of sweat on their foreheads. But at this moment, no one felt tired. On the contrary, they looked around nervously. At this moment, someone ran up from behind and shouted, "Black Bee Thief." What the mules carrying are most afraid of is not the officers and soldiers. Since the boss dares to come to Hengshan to smuggle goods, they usually have everything taken care of. What they are most afraid of is a group of bandits in the mountains. They are the Black Bee bandits. The first three people, Gun Bee, are highly skilled in martial arts. Their bright silver spears can be heard in the Hanzhou River, and no one can defeat them. The Knife Bee is ruthless and will never leave anyone alive under a big knife. Fan Feng was both smart and brave. Under his plan, the officers and soldiers suppressed several bee thieves, but failed to capture a single bee robber. However, the villages in the security army border area live in this difficult area, and all of them are fierce by nature. Even the black bee thieves dare not come to the villages to rob homes and homes. But for the mulebacks, without the protection of the village wall, once they encounter the black bee thieves, it will be a disaster. And because the gangsters eat the gangsters, they have no way to appeal for help. Everyone stopped together and stood on the top of the slope looking into the distance. A line of shadows flashed out in the distance, and in the middle of the shadows was a tattered flag with a strange black wasp embroidered on it. That black wasp is every muleback's nightmare. Disaster has arrived. Wang Ju was a mule for the first time, and he also heard about some of the great deeds of the Black Bee Bandit. In fact, every private business trip involves a large group of mules with simple weapons in their hands, so there are not many bandits who dare to attack the private business team. However, the Black Bee thieves are an exception, and they never leave anyone alive.